Was the Army the first choice?
No. So it wasn't. I surrounded myself with individuals who actually been there, done that.
Hmm.
I had a couple friends who were in the Navy, a couple friends who were in the Army. Actually, my uncle served in the U.S. Army.
Well, first, go Navy. All right.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, what are some of the challenges that you speak about? Because I myself, I dealt with a lot of mental strain that I never understood
hmm
as a young man going into the military. Was that something that you dealt with?
Yes, I remember my shipping date, leaving the military MEPS, right? Getting into the hotel, doing the steps, getting into the airplane. It kind of like hits you right off the back, like, oh, wait, this is actually happening.
That there, I would never forget that moment, right?
hmm
That time in my life, it was just a huge eye opener. And it's, oh, you're an adult now. You make the decisions. Well, what decisions are you going to make moving forward through the military?
Ultimately, it's what the Army thrives off of is the team aspect.
Army values.
Army values.
Army values. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, I left it at the door as well as soon as I.
Hello and welcome to Veterans Voices. I'd like to introduce a special guest, Mr. Ivan Rivera, an Army specialist who is bringing an inspiring story of service and resilience. Ivan was stationed with the 170 Army Airborne Brigade, 2nd Battalion, 503 Infantry Regiment overseas in Italy. Throughout his military career, he exemplified the dedication, discipline, and bravery expected as from an airborne soldier. In October 2021, Ivan was training at an airborne school in Fort Benning, Georgia, where he completed rigorous training and challenging of the night combat jumps. His experiences of training for overseas deployments has shaped his journey and provided with a unique perspective on service. Today, Ivan joins us at Veterans Voices to share his journey, his experiences of overseas, the challenges, triumphs, and everything that he encountered along the way. We're honored to have him here, and we're excited to be able to share his story and perseverance of strength. Today on Veteran Voices, Mr. Ivan Rivera.
Hey guys, it's a pleasure to being here with you, Kenneth Davis, and I look forward to sharing my experiences in the U.S. Army.
Nice, nice, man. Well, first and foremost, we really want to thank you for having taken the time and taking the opportunity to join us here, giving our audience a perspective of, jump school and the Army,
Yeah.
overseas experience, family life,
Yep.
and so on and so forth. So we really, really thank you for this and taking that time and opportunity. But first and foremost, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good, pretty good. It's a beautiful day in sunny San Diego. It's definitely it's coming back from being stationed overseas. I've been here for about a year or so. It is relatively a experience when it comes to transitioning out of the U.S. Army or any military branch
Yeah.
back to the civilian lifestyle. So yeah, it's a wonderful time right now.
Awesome, awesome. We're here on the show. We always want to ask one of the most pivotal questions I think that everyone has a story of, right?
hmm
But let me ask, why did you join the military?
Uh, that is a really great question. I could tell you right off the back, everybody has different experiences or opinions on why they've joined any type of branch of service. With that being said, mine was basically in regards to being in a position where I felt like I was stuck. I
Mm,
felt like I wasn't progressing in life. Also, on top of that, no, I was in a situation where my girlfriend at the time was actually pregnant.
mm,
So I wanted to basically find an avenue where I could become uh, progressive in life and support, my up and coming family, my spouse and my newborn at the time, or my son to be born. So basically, with that being said, that was one of the main reasons why I joined the military was just to be uh, elevate myself for the future.
nice, nice. Yeah, and we hear so many different types of stories. Again, we have several different veterans that we interview on a regular basis, right? And it's always a challenging one.
Hmm.
It seems as though your challenge was challenging yourself, right? Which is always a really huge impact. I think most people don't do in the civilian sector at times.
Hmm.
But it looks like you wanted to go and transition to be able to challenge yourself to really to support not only your family
Hmm.
but to support your physical and your mental and also
Hmm.
your growth just in general. Where did you garner that type of mindset from?
So I think it comes down to my upbringing. You know, my parents didn't have much, growing up. Then so they have to work for everything they got to this day. So ultimately, they installed us how to work hard. You know, as a little kid, if we wanted something, my dad would be like, "Hey, well, you got to work for it. So figure out what you're gonna do, so that way we can try to accommodate you." So, for instance, I would look to see if there was any chores to do around the house.
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, chores such as cutting the grass, for instance.
Hmm.
So ultimately that's where I feel like it came from, was from my parents passed down to myself. So that kind of guided me all the way to my early adulthood, where it's just like, okay, well, if I'm in a position where I feel stuck, right, then I got to figure out a way so that way I can help myself, in the future, to provide for myself, but also ultimately my wife and my son.
Mm.
So therefore, I started branching out to different avenues, such as the military, where the military, if you really understand, they can, the military can provide you with a lot of benefits. You just gotta do your research,
Mm.
surround yourself by individuals who's actually been there and done that, and they can actually guide you and tell you their personal experience. So that's the main reason why.
Mm. Well, with that, was the military I mean, sorry, was the army the first choice?
Um, no. So it wasn't. With that being said, as I mentioned, I surrounded myself with individuals who actually been there, done that.
Hmm.
I had a couple friends who were in the Navy, a couple friends who were in the Army. Actually, my uncle served in the U.S. Army.
Well, first, go Navy already.
Yeah. So then, and I also had an uncle who was in the Marines.
Mm.
So I was just asking around, branching out, doing my research, and I actually went to a couple recruiting depots where it's just, I got a little information, and ultimately, I figured it out at the end where it's like, you know what, let's go with the Army. Let's go with the
Nice,
Army.
nice. Then making that choice. So, how did your parents take that when actually going into that, making that decision as a young man?
Um, right off the back, my parents, like I said, they came from nothing, and then seeing their son, ultimately trying to accomplish things in life, they knew from the get go, like, hey, joining any type of branch is an honor, right?
Mm.
When we join any type of branch, we're serving the United States of America. We're also contributing to the United States of America. So they were honored. They were honored. They like to brag about, about me essentially to their colleagues. Hey, my son is, he just joined the US Army. He's doing great things.
Mm.
So yeah, they were honored.
So, I mean, obviously, your parents. I mean, they groomed you, right? They put
Yeah.
you in a position where you're going to be, again, establish this sense of being. Now, when you did go off to the army,
Hmm.
what was that experience? That transition? Pregnant girlfriend at the time at home.
Yeah.
And, and now, if you can set the landscape of you being here in San Diego and your upbringing here, was it you and your girlfriend, you and your family, or was it like, boom, you go straight to the military from your family, or was it something that was a kind of a incremental thing?
So it was definitely a process. Once I figured out which branch I wanted to serve, such
Mm.
as the U.S. Army, I opted into the delay interest program.
Okay.
So it did give me some time frame, so I could sit back and enjoy my wife and her pregnancy, and create a game plan. But ultimately, like when that day came where I had to ship out, it was pretty hard. It was pretty
Mm,
tough transitioning. Leaving my wife essentially by herself to not fend by herself because we relatively have a good foundation. We had my parents, her parents to support, but just making that leap, the transition was hard, right? Because
yeah,
at the end of the day, it's just me and her,
yeah.
right? So, but I knew at the end of the day, she was strong. She's mentally strong, capable. Um, and I knew that it was going to serve us great purposes in the future. So the transition from civilian world to the military, it was hard, definitely, without a doubt. A lot of people don't see behind closed doors what it takes, right? A lot of people think like, oh, it's not hard, blah blah. No, it is. You're leaving your family. You're taking a risk, right?
Yeah.
Um, so those are a lot of things that a lot of people need to understand that it's just more than that. You're taking risks, you're leaving behind your loved ones. You feel lonely, at times. But if you just think about it, you're doing yourself
I mean, essentially, you're doing yourself a great service by
yes, yes.
growing yourself and putting yourself in that position. But let me ask you, what are some of the challenges that you speak about? Because I myself, I dealt with a lot of mental strain that I never understood
Mhm.
as a young man going into the military. Was that something that you endured? Because again, when you're talking about leaving your family, when you're talking about going through these physical changes, because we're still growing
Mhm.
essentially as when we're going into the military and they shape you. Was that something that you dealt with?
Yes, I remember my shipping date, leaving the military MEPS, right?
Mm.
uh, Getting into the hotel, doing the steps, getting into the airplane on our way to Fort Benning, Georgia. It kind of like hits you right off the back, like, oh wait, this is actually happening, So then you kind of feel like how you mentioned mental stressors, a little bit of depression starts to kick in. You're like, wow, I'm gonna be here. I'm gonna be away from my family for about over 6 months to a year based off of the trainings. So it's yes, the mental stresses are there, but you just gotta adapt. You gotta
Yeah.
adapt and realize that eventually you will see them again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, most definitely, and we don't. I don't think we put enough strain on the families,
Mm,
and really focus on the families that go through these changes as well, because it's not only the service member who are going. And again, hats off to all service members who are going through that transition. However, the families, the strain it takes. Again, you talk about having a pregnant wife at home,
yeah.
right? That can drive any man just through the ringer,
Hmm.
so that is always a tough, and we always put our hats off to those who are simply going through those changes and family members that are going through those changes. That mental anguish, the physical anguish that you guys go through, hats off to you, the wives, the husbands, the
Yes.
spouses, period. Thank you guys so much, first and foremost. But with that, um, going through MEPS, right?
Hmm.
MEPS is always interesting. Everyone has
Yeah.
a MEPS
Every,
story.
uh-huh.
MEPS,
Yeah.
man, for me going through MEPS, man, I think reality hit when I got all these vaccinations,
Oh yeah.
and that was just such a transitional moment for me. It's like, oh, wake up call, right?
Yeah.
But after that, when you actually touch down in Fort Benning, Georgia, what
Yeah.
is that? What is that feeling like?
Uh, so, obviously, when your shipping date is coming soon, you're currently at the MEPS, you're at the hotel, you're very curious. You hop on YouTube and you start searching up videos. In my case, searching up, Army boot camp. I was very curious to see what is it like.
Mhm.
And it's exactly what you see. You hop in as soon as you touch down from the airport, you're in Atlanta. The buses arrive. It's
Mhm.
about, I think, like a 3 hour drive from the airport to Fort Benning. As soon as you touch down to the installation pad, the base, oh yeah, the drill sergeants are
Oh,
ready
it's
to
on.
go. It's on. That's when everybody was laughing, and all of a sudden it just went quiet.
Mhm.
Oh, this is what it's like. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a culture shock. That's what it's like. Yeah,
What time did you touch down?
I would say around 0800.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, it was the middle of the night when I got there. And when you're talking about the middle of the night, a 18, 19-year-old kid hopping off the bus is looking, and all you hear, get in line, you
Yeah.
and when you're hearing all that, in my mind, I think I made a mistake.
Uh-huh. Yes, without a doubt. I think everybody that was on the bus was feeling like that. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was that there I would never forget that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
That time in my life, it was just a huge eye opener.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, oh, you're an adult now.
Oh yeah.
You make the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what decisions are you going to make moving forward through the military?
Mm-hmm.
And now, with you going in boot camp,
Mm-hmm.
what were some of those decisions that you made going through boot camp? What were some of the changes that you went through? And who were some of the people that impacted that?
So, some of the changes that you right off the back have to, um, so some of the changes right off the back were either A, you adapt and you follow the protocols that are set, as becoming a U.S. Army soldier, or B, you just say, hey, you know what? I don't care that I signed a contract, but this is it. I'm done. I'm not gonna listen. I'm gonna hope that they uh, kick me out of the army, right? So, but you don't want to be that guy, ultimately, this is what you sign up for. Um, go through the stressors. In the army, they say you just gotta live with the suck.
Mm,
That's essentially what you have to do. So I know right off the bat, hopping out the bus, getting introduced to the drill sergeants, it's not pretty, but this is the U.S. Army. It's worse out there, right? So it's basically getting you, molding you, leaving all the civilian aspects at the door and treating you as becoming a U.S. Army soldier. So, yes, it is. Those are the options. Either you adapt or you don't.
what was one of the first pros and what was one of the first cons? For example, one of my first pros, for some odd reason, I assumed that the food was going to be terrible.
Mm,
I had some of the best breakfast, I think, of all
yeah.
times. And I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. It was,
Mm,
when we were talking
yeah.
about the food aspect, obviously when you go out into the fleet is totally different. So
Mm-hmm.
please do not
Yeah.
do not take that for
Yeah.
for a stone. But what were some of the pros and what were some of the cons that immediately off the back that you immediately noticed?
The pros, I would say, the pros would be ultimately making right off the back. You had developed friendship right off the
Mm,
back. You just hopped up the bus and you met people that you would never even think you would come across. You have people coming from all areas of America, north, south, east, west. I met some guy from the slums of Georgia. His name was Paul, and he was such a great guy. I never thought I would meet a country guy like that.
yeah.
But he was such a great guy. He was my essentially part of the bunk bed. I was on the top bed, he was in the bottom. But he was an awesome guy. So the friendships right off the back, everybody kind of knew like, hey, listen, this is all new to us, but right off the back, we have to build that team chemistry. And like I said, as soon as you hop on the bus, everybody knew like, hey, it's team aspect now. This is what it's about. Um, the cons was basically transitioning to having sleep, right? You pick and choose when you want to essentially wake up, when you want to go to sleep. Over here, no, they'll
No.
sometimes wake you up in the middle of the night. Hey, everybody, come out. So that was the con right there, sleeping.
Yeah, I think I lost a few brain cells from sleep deprivation for sure.
Yeah.
100% sleep deprivation. That was a tough one right
Yeah.
there. But just going back and touching on the camaraderie, everyone
Yeah.
has that person in the
Yeah.
boot camp, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I had a fella, and this is we were really good friends, and he was
Yeah.
trying out for the Navy SEALs. That's when we kind of split ways. I tried,
Ah.
I went once or twice, and I said, yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
probably not for me.
Yeah.
Too much water. Too much water. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
but yeah, that camaraderie is always a good aspect in transition. How long was boot camp for you?
So it was 6 months. 6 months of training. and then after that it was basic, and then it transitioned to AIT, which is basically advanced training based off of the MOS that you picked.
Hmm.
And then after that, because I had Airborne in my contract. From there, we basically transitioned to Airborne School. Yes, so
Big Dog Airborne School,
yeah,
man.
Airborne, right? That's what they say.
Airborne,
You gotta get
yeah,
your
man.
wings. It's better than a leg unit.
So, we always hear about these specialty MOSs or
Mhm.
specialty attachments. And when we're talking about AIT, and that's for those that don't know, again, that's advanced training, right?
Mhm.
So now with going through AIT for Airborne, how was that?
So when it comes to, well, we'll start off with basic training, right?
Okay.
You're transitioning from civilian world to becoming a soldier. They're literally taking everything you got
Hmm.
and they're throwing it at the door or leaving it at the door. They want you to become the soldier that they have in mind, right? So they're molding you into become an individual who is willing to learn aspects and new traits, also values, um, such as an example that would be teamwork, right? Team. It's all about team. They want to get rid of the individualism, throw it, leave it at the door, and focus on teamwork. It was challenging for some people at the time. Like I said, it's a culture shock, but ultimately, it's what the Army thrives off of is the team aspect. Um,
Army values.
Army values.
Army values. Go ahead.
Yes. Uh, yeah, I left it at the door as well as soon as I integrity,
Come
right?
on,
Integrity.
honor, courage,
Yeah,
commitment,
there you
man.
go.
Come on, that's
Exactly.
Navy.
Yeah, but definitely team aspect.
The
Yeah.
unit. Nothing or no one is above the unit,
Mm-hmm.
and that is just what it is. We and also respect for hierarchy. That
Yes.
was one of the components
Yes.
that I think the transition to the civilian sector. It's just it's a component that I think if everyone walked around with their rank on their shoulder, you get a different perspective of that person,
Mm-hmm.
right? Immediately
Yeah.
in the Army, you see an Army officer, and in that, on top of that, if they're an airborne officer,
Mm-hmm.
it's immediately the respect is there. It's
Yes.
not even an option to
Yes.
go against the grain because it's
Mhm.
team first,
Yeah.
unit first. So, but I think the civilian sector transition, meant with that going into boot camp,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that description of the again team unit
Mm-hmm.
values and so on, and then bringing that to the civilian sector is very a tough transition.
Yeah.
Um, but I say that to say because going through the military just in general,
Mm-hmm.
it changes you as a human being,
Yes.
and with those changes, you can't always determine the good or bad. And I think that's a
Yeah.
huge component that I think a lot of people don't take in consideration of.
Yeah.
But for you, I can already tell
Yeah.
it already changed you for the better.
Yeah.
It made you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
It developed the mental, but also it also developed you as a man.
Yes.
And what are some of those values that you lead with today in the civilian sector, which we're going to get back to,
Mm.
AIT and
Yeah.
such. But what do you think boot camp kind of instilled in you outside of the team and unit components?
Well, some of the traits and the values that I've learned, let's obviously teamwork, right? I still
Hmm.
bring that over. I have a wife, as I mentioned, and I have a son. Um, that's my little team,
Mm.
right? That's my little team. You know, we live our day-to-day lives based off of teamwork. If there's certain things I need to accomplish, right, or some tasks that I need help out with, my spouse is able to help me out, accommodate. So teamwork is definitely embedded into our lifestyles.
Mm.
Adaptation is also another trait that I've learned, right? Nothing ever goes as planned, especially if you're in any type of military branch. You'll notice that they could set out a task and it never goes accordingly to plan. There's
Ever,
always some type of issue that's happening,
ever.
right? So learning to adapt is something that's what I use to this day. Our daily goals as well. It doesn't sometimes go according to plan. So able to adapt helps a lot, right? Being resilient also.
Mm,
Um, Nothing's easy in life. I was always taught that from the beginning from my parents, and the military lifestyle also taught us as well. Being resilient, able to go forward, push through the phrase suck, right? Push
hmm.
through it, accept it, um, and move forward from it.
Obviously, values are huge here. Values are huge, transitioning outside of service, inside of service, regardless. But now, tell me your. I want to dive a little bit deeper.
Hmm.
What are some of the physical things that you guys did? Because a lot of youngsters who are going through service, oh, they want to know. They want to know what was some of the most, I guess, difficult physical, components of it.
Yeah, so I would say depending on your drill sergeants, right? When it comes to boot camp and AIT, some of them are a little bit. My experience is some of them are a little bit. I would say a little bit more aggressive than others. Some drill
Mm-hmm.
sergeants are more laid back, right? But it was definitely a culture shock. There were certain things that you would do that you never thought you would expect. But just leave it like that. I think if you're gonna enlist, whether it's in any other branches or such as the army, you'll experience that yourself. You'll figure it out once you get there. But as far as the physical attributes that we experience, it was just obviously physical activity is a must, right? They had us run all the time. Run, um, push ups, sit ups. Already if you're not an athlete per se, I mean, you don't have to be an athlete. That's what basic training is for. They're gonna shape you and mold you to be as physically fit as you possibly can.
Mm.
So get ready with that. A lot of burpees as well, and
Oh,
just cause they
yeah,
definitely smoked us.
yeah.
Being 11 Bravo, you're held to a certain standard.
I
Your
guess.
job is just basically to be physically fit and learn how to work in a team environment, and then also learn how to use your weapons. That's what you're getting paid to do. So yes, physical activity is a must. You're gonna be doing that all the time. There's gonna be a time where you're just sitting in the barracks room, and all of a sudden, drill sergeants, I say it plural because they like to work as a team. So they'll come in, they'll bust through the door, and they'll be like, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Nothing? Okay, perfect. Let's do some burpees, uh, squats, push ups, sit ups, to the whole point where the whole bay is just, it's moist. It's sweat is just all over the
What they say,
floor.
make the wall sweat. Let's get to it.
Yep,
Oh
exactly. And on
man.
top of that, no, they're just gonna look at your guys' lockers. They're like sharks. They're like sharks in the water. They want to see whose locker is open. Oh, mine was open, unfortunately. So you best believe all my belongings was just thrown everywhere.
Oh,
As we're doing burpees, they grab the laundry detergent or the soap and they start spraying all over the bay. So as we're doing burpees, people are slipping and sliding. It's just, it's a relatively a fun experience now that I look back at it. But at that moment, you're like, wow, this does suck. I think I made a mistake. Yes, yeah.
oh man, that brings back so many memories. That's exciting, man. It's just I think that going through the suck together,
Yes.
that's what brings it together, right?
Yes.
Going through the suck together. It's always a one because you always have that one guy.
Uh-huh.
Right? You
Yep.
always have that one, that one
Yeah.
guy. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, come on, man. And
Yep.
that one guy will, I mean, again, get the whole company in trouble
Oh yeah.
over and
Yeah.
over and over and over again. It's like, and next thing you know, someone has to step to him. It's like, hey, we gotta chill it out now.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, man, that's amazing, man. But now, boom, we graduate boot camp, right?
Mhm.
Um, graduating boot camp was a pretty accomplishment that I don't
Mhm.
think a lot of people understand. It's almost like graduating high school.
Yeah.
You get that For us, it was to get that Navy ball cap.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get that Navy ball cap, your chest is just a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
feel you have a little bit more pride.
Yeah.
But then you ship off to AIT.
Yeah.
How was that for you? You're going through airborne school. This is the top of the top. This is the
Mm.
cream of the crop.
Well,
How was it for
yeah.
you?
Well, first it's basic training, and then
Mm-hmm.
you go to AIT. So depending on your MOS, either you'll stay in Fort Benning, right? So in my case, I was 11 Bravo.
Mm-hmm.
We stayed, kept the same drill sergeants, so we didn't go anywhere. So it was just we finished the first phase was basic training, and then all of a sudden we did a little ceremony. We're considered a U.S. Army soldier, right? So that is the first stepping stone. Now it transitions to AIT, where basically for 11 Bravos, you're focusing more on your job aspect, right? You're learning how to do tactics. The tactics are increased. You're learning how to shoot. You're going to the shooting range a lot more. Um, you're doing a lot more training in the field, instead of in the barracks. So that is the second stepping stone, is just focusing on your job and learning new skills, stuff that you're going to use once AIT is done. You're going to go to your unit, you're going to use that and build upon it depending on where you're stationed at. So AIT was relatively the same, just more learning more new skills. You're still getting smoked, so that's nothing changes. Still the perception, the personality, as far as okay, yes, we are a U.S. Army soldier, but we're still privates.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what they
yeah.
refer to as privates. So, but it was the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
From there, once you graduate AIT, that's when either A, if you don't have an airborne contract or ranger contract or special forces contract, you'll go automatically you'll get your documents, your packet, and you'll go ship out to your duty station. Or if for my case, since I had an airborne school, I literally hop on the bus, some airborne uh, instructor would come,
Mm-hmm.
and he would pick us up and he will take us a couple blocks down the hall from Fort Benning, and then here you go, we're in airborne school now. So
Mm.
yes, airborne school was, I believe it was a month long. So it was definitely a lot better circumstances in airborne school. You had a lot more freedom,
There's no way you're gonna tell me it's a lot better jumping out of planes.
Jumping out of planes, no, because I was afraid of falling. They say there's a difference between afraid of heights and afraid of falling,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I was afraid of falling. I figured that one out. I was afraid of falling.
Explain.
So this is what the airborne instructor had mentioned, because he said, "Hey, you're either two things: afraid of heights or afraid of falling, and you guys will figure it out once you're there in the airplane." Ultimately, when I jumped out the first time out of the airplane, I was not in a good position mentally. But I didn't want to be that guy, because you would see, you know, some of your buddies jumping out, coming back, and you're up next essentially to jump, and you're like, wow, if they did it, I could do it too. Or if the females did it, I could do it too. I don't want to be that guy. I don't care if I'm afraid. I'm gonna go and do it because I just don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
So that was basically the main factor that kind of like guided me to actually accomplish my fear.
Mm.
But yes, afraid of falling was definitely what impacted me, and then it's just having that anxiousness of just falling. You're just like, oh wow, is my chute gonna open up? Which it did. It did.
Yeah.
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 So it was definitely an experience.
Man, you're better than me. Okay, I'll tell you right now. I was
Yeah.
afraid to jump off the platform, to jump in the water, to swim where we needed to. It was like
Yeah.
Olympic sized pool. Jump off the platform and swim all. That was tough for me. So I'm afraid
Yeah.
of heights, and I'm
Yeah.
probably afraid of falling, and I'm
Yeah.
afraid of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But man, so walk me through your first jump. I mean,
The first jump was like I said, it was very full of anxiousness. Everybody's all rigged up. Well, it was actually a Hollywood jump. So basically, it's just simple parachute, right? You have one in the back, and then one in the front. Your emergency, right? So you're not suited and booted. It's simple Hollywood. Get on the airplane. So it's obviously a process. before you even get on the airplane, it's a process. The airborne instructors look at you, make sure everything's all rigged up accordingly, and you'll literally sit there for hours just to wait and get on the airplane, which only takes like a couple minutes. You get on the airplane, you get up to a certain altitude, and then you jump out, and then that's it.
So you're sitting there waiting. Where
Yeah.
are you waiting? Is this some type of holding?
Yes, you're just basically waiting for the Air Force pilots to get everything situated. There's probably like 300 airbornees,
Okay.
if you want to call that. But you're just waiting, sit and wait, sit and wait. That's
Hurry up and wait. That's
Yeah,
military's mantra.
yeah,
As always. I
yeah.
mean, that goes across all branches. So,
Yes, yeah,
so now you're sitting and waiting, and now I know you guys are talking amongst each other,
oh, yeah,
and some of these guys have already jumped. And
yeah.
were they giving you advice? Were they?
Yes. So as we're sitting and waiting, we're all rigged up, and we're just kind of like quiet. It's just in your head. You're just like, oh, I'm anxious. I'm nervous. What's gonna happen? What if this doesn't? What if my parachute doesn't open up? How is it gonna? Is it gonna hurt when I fall? Because they say you land like a sack of potatoes.
Um,
It's not like a soft landing like normally what you see. But a lot of questions just start running through your head, and then when you see that first wave that just comes back, they're all excited, they got the adrenaline rush, and they're like, oh yeah, it was fun. So that kind of made it a lot easier. Like, okay, if they did it, I could do it.
mm,
Like I said, I was afraid of falling, but I'm not gonna be that guy where I just be like, oh, I'm not doing it, airborne, I'm not doing it.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
airborne, I'm not doing it. So ultimately it was a good experience.
So you go up. Now you're
Hmm.
up.
Yep.
Now you're flying.
Uh-huh.
How long does it take before they open the back and say, "Hey, it's time to go"?
Not that long.
Not that
It
long.
doesn't take that long. Everything's a process.
Yeah.
Once they open up that door, you're looking at the airborne. You're looking at airborne, and just like, okay, here you go. Here's the static line. It looks at you. All right, here you go. Boom, pass it off, and then just exit out.
And
And you just exit out the airplane. A perfectly good flying airplane. Nothing wrong with it, right? You're just jumping out, right? Um, and it is an experience. It's an experience.
so take me down that fall.
Jumping out, my first jump, uh, like I said, it was relatively scary at first, but once you're jumping out the airplane, parachute opens up accordingly, everything's going smooth, and you're like, okay, I'm up, I'm descending slowly, and you're just like, you know what? Let me take a time and let me just experience everything. Let me slow things down. You start seeing the trees. You start seeing other guys with their parachute, open, just slowly descending. So it was a good experience.
Mm.
At first it's a little chaotic, right? Because you never experienced that, and all the what ifs are just playing in your head. But after a while, you just soak it in. You're just like, wow, this is actually a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, I hear it. I hear a lot of people that make those jumps. It says liberating.
Yeah,
It's fairly liberating. It's just you and
yeah,
that's it. It's just you and the fall, and you're just kind of going through, taking your time and
yeah,
and wait until you hit land.
yeah.
That's
You,
amazing,
you
man.
better hope that you land nice and soft. Some landings were soft, some weren't.
Yeah,
All of my buddies who landed and got back like, oh, dude, I got pain on my hip, oh, my back. So,
yeah.
yeah, being a part of airborne, you're definitely putting a lot of wear and tear on your body. That is
Oh
for sure.
yeah, for sure. I can only
Yeah,
imagine. Definitely the practice over and over and over and over.
exactly.
And essentially you just again, you're human, so you're gonna naturally gain wear and tear jumping out of airplanes. Like
Yes.
it's just gonna happen. But I mean, so that's your first jump.
Yeah.
Now, as you go through this first jump, and you have obviously
Yeah.
your comrades, um, and now you're transitioning. Now tell me about the last jump.
So the last jump was a combat jump, a night combat jump. So the training basically consisted of like if you were jumping into a hostile environment, we're trying to simulate things to be as real as possible. So it was obviously all of our first times jumping at night and also in combat, so you're all suited. You got your rucksack, you got your Molly 4K, you got your rifle attached. Everything's ready to go. You're portraying it to be real life scenario. So it was cool because as soon as we got into the airplane, the lights were all like green, like what you see in the movies. You see like those Navy SEAL guys, the
Mm,
Special Forces guys, on the movies, and you're just like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. Like,
mm.
you feel like almost
Yeah, yeah.
like a badass. So it was definitely an experience. Jumping out of the airplane at night. It was a fun time. It was a fun
Nice,
time.
nice. So uh, uh, that feeling, I know,
Yeah.
I know that feeling that where you just ultimately it's like I think it just charges you up. Like,
Yeah,
oh
it does.
man,
Yeah.
after they have removed the civilian out you,
Yeah.
put the unit in you, and now stamped you. You're airborne
Yeah.
now, doing something like that.
Exactly.
You know, but that's amazing, man. Again, we can't thank you enough for those stories because ultimately as civilians now we don't get that.
Mhm.
We don't get the insight of how, and not only how, but if becoming something, how to become a
Mhm.
airborne combat readiness uh, army soldier.
Mhm.
Because it takes a certain grit, and
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people talk about that. If most that you see that are going through these
Mhm.
boot camps or schools, they're not deliberately or inherently giving the grit. You go through the transition, you go through the
Yeah.
ways, you go through how um, how failure happens, and
Exactly.
also how successes happen as well.
Exactly.
But now, I guess once you have graduated and really put the stamp on you, and now you have become the one, right?
Yeah.
You are now an airborne soldier.
Yep.
Um, where does the military take you then?
So after your 5 jumps, after you complete your 5 jumps, you basically do the airborne ceremony. Um, you'll get the your wings, right? That's ultimately the goal, to get your wings. Once you get your wings, you complete your 5 jumps. You know, you feel different.
Hmm.
You feel a lot like you elevated. It is an elevation if you think about it. You elevate yourself to a higher standard. You're looked at different. There's always that competitiveness between airborne, and then you have your leg units.
Hmm.
And then, what I mean leg units is basically uh, soldiers who basically are not jumping airplanes. They do everything on land, so they're using their legs.
Hmm.
And then you do have air assault, which they repel off of helicopters.
Hmm.
So there's that competitiveness between everybody. Airborne is like, oh, we're airborne. You're a leg unit, get away from me. Or you're air assault. You guys are boring. Blah blah blah. So there's that competitive nature between uh, everybody.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure you can probably speak upon that as well within the Navy. Like there's
Oh yeah,
competitiveness
sure.
between the inner fighting lines as well. You're
Hmm.
just always trying to be above one another.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
So
just a friendly competition,
yeah,
right? Always pushing one another,
yeah,
pushing one
exactly.
another.
Yes.
But most definitely.
But once you get your airborne wings, then right away you get hit with your packet, and you figure out what duty station you're going to. A lot of people went to the 82nd. A lot of people went to New York. In my case, I was gifted to go to Italy. 173rd Airborne Brigade. So it was cool. It was once again it was an experience because it's it's a cool experience because once you get that packet and it says Italy, then you automatically you call your loved ones. In my case, my spouse, and I let her know, hey, guess where I got, orders to go to? She's like, where? Italy. What? I'm very hysterical, because, who doesn't want to go to, a different country and
Yeah,
experience that, that overseas lifestyle. So it was a cool experience for my family and I.
nice. Did you ever experience going overseas beforehand?
As far as like vacation wise, no, not really,
Yeah.
so this was definitely a new transition for us.
Mm.
Definitely.
And was it so for me?
Hmm.
you know, getting those orders and being able to have the honor to serve on the USS Ronald Reagan, traveling the world, I cannot take that back on how impactful that was for me as a human being.
Yeah.
Being stationed over there to live amongst other in another country, just in a different world.
Yeah.
How did that impact you and your family?
So it was a culture shock. I got there first, before my wife and my son did. It took a while, even though I got orders and we were married, it's still a process.
Mhm.
Everything's a process. So it took a little longer than I thought, to get my wife and my son, living with me in Italy. But, once we all were there and settled down, it was definitely a culture shock on top of the military lifestyle as well.
Mhm.
So not only are you transitioning from, you know, American duty station to the overseas duty station like Italy, you're just like, oh, now you're getting hit with, essentially two culture shocks at one.
Mhm.
So you're adapting to the military lifestyle and you're adapting to the overseas lifestyle. So for me, it was relatively not so harsh, but for my spouse, it was a little harsh as well. You know, leaving her family,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Leaving her family now and coming and living with me, and then adapting to the Italian lifestyle. So
Yeah.
it was a little hard for her.
Yeah, and that's why I always want to recognize, it's always not one person that is
Exactly.
affected.
Yeah.
And a lot of times um, we deem the service member to
Right.
be the only one that's impacted
Yeah.
hugely. No,
Yeah.
no. I mean, the entire circle of influence are affected. The
Yeah.
children, the spouse, the friends and family. It's just
Yeah.
everyone is affected,
Yeah.
and it is a very impactful decision. And whoever takes the decision to go to the military,
Yeah.
understand it is not just you.
Yep.
It is not just you, because if you think it's just you and you think you're only going to be worried about you, you already going into it with the wrong mindset.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I mean, Italy with that transitional, culture, cultural influx.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that really was a big deal?
Well, for us, living in Italy was a blessing. We got gifted, the contract to be stationed there. Um, the where we were stationed at was in Vicenza, which relatively is a spot where it's ultimately very family oriented.
Mm.
The people there were, my perspective, were pretty awesome. Other soldiers could probably tell you different. But since it's family oriented and I already had my family there, it felt perfectly, good for our needs.
Mm.
The food there was obviously really great. It's Italian food is really it's speaks for itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a blessing, to be
Nice,
stationed there in Italy in Vicenza. Yes.
nice. Man, I can, having those experiences, but also having, I don't know if it ever happens to you, but always, sometimes flashback those memories and those times.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can actually smell the air, taste the
Yeah.
food, like you're just there again, and for the good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Does that have, does that, again, I'm sure that you and your spouse can kind of really relate on that level of things now in the civilian sector and now, but being back in America,
Hmm.
was that another transition for you guys?
Yes, because we adapted to the Italian lifestyle, and the Italian people. One thing that you will notice is that they move very slow. There's the Italian time frame, right, where they just do things their timeline. If it's time to take a lunch or break, oh, they'll take it. They'll take it. There's a time in the day where they take at least 2 hours, and
Wow.
it almost seems like they're all on the same type of page here. Like we're
Yeah.
just like, oh, it's let's say it's 12 p.m. Okay, so we'll get back to work at 2 p.m. I don't know. It just almost seems like they're all in sync with each other. Nothing moves, everything's quiet, and you're like, where's everybody at? Oh, they're on lunch. Oh, okay. You know, Transitioning back to the civilian world, you notice that Obviously, depending on where you live, since in our case, we live in San Diego, things just move
So
fast.
much more faster. Yeah.
Every single day, it's all of a sudden it's the weekend. All of a sudden it's back to work. So the transitioning lifestyle from Italian, uh, Italy to the United States is it's a big difference when it comes to the time frames. So
Yeah.
yes.
Oh man, I can only imagine. What was the determining factor that actually transitioned you out? Because for me, I was a really huge guy on team, you
Mhm.
know, and I personally would have done 30 years
Mhm.
if I thought I had again, I had good people around me, but specifically job wise, I think leadership was lacking for myself, and I reflect upon that, and you have these life instances. It's like, hey, you take a flashback, do some self-reflection. Was it me? Was it this? Was it that? And that's where my time in the military, I think I would have continued years and years and years. But what made you transition?
Since I would say leadership as well. If we're being honest here, I'm gonna bring off the back. No profession is perfect.
Mm,
You're gonna have good leadership and you're gonna have bad leadership.
yeah.
In my circumstances, and I'm pretty sure I have some buddies who probably say the same thing. Leadership was probably one of the main reasons why uh, transitioning was on the table. You
Mm,
know, um, there's just a lot of you wish you could have a lot more support, right, from your leadership. It almost yes, there's that team aspect, but sometimes depending on who your leadership is, it's they're favoring themselves
mm,
over the soldiers underneath them.
mm,
You know, don't get me wrong. I had some very good leadership. I had a couple good first sergeants who understand that maybe you're a family guy or not. They actually cared. They put all their focuses and all their attention on their soldiers. So but overall, I feel like leadership does play a significant amount of role. There's a lot of situations where, for instance, some of my buddies got married, and they were trying to get their wife, especially if they're pregnant or not, trying to get them over here to be stationed with them.
mm,
You could submit as many paperwork and documents as you possibly can. Things just get lost. People say, "Oh, I don't know, not my problem," right? So, and then you go to your higher ups, the leadership. Hey, first sergeant, I'm trying to get my wife here. She's pregnant. I want to see her. We got married. Blah blah blah. How can we make that happen? Oh, I got it. Private. Don't worry about it. It's handled. It's the paperwork was sent to S1. Couple weeks later, oh, we lost the paperwork. We don't know what you're talking about, or you never submitted it. So after a while, that does get annoying because it's like, hey, listen, I signed my life away with you guys. I'm putting my life on the line, and then eventually it's just kind of like, so you guys are not gonna have my back, right? I'm doing all of this, and you guys can't have my back. So it does play a big role in you, and you kind of lose that fight, because as it is, if
mm,
you have family they're stationed back at home, and you're trying to get him over here, because after all, we got married, and I want them to come live with me, overseas, but yet you can't accommodate that. You're losing my paperwork. You lose that fight and that
mm.
thrive. You're already lonely as it is.
Yeah.
So after a while, obviously, leadership does take a toll on
Oh, it takes a
you. Yeah,
it takes a huge toll. You're talking about, the mental anguish, right? You're
yeah,
you're by yourself. You're going through this physical beating every day,
yeah,
and now you're in a total different country
yeah,
that you don't know anyone and no one knows you. But it's always that one person that always gives that glimmer of light and gives you that hope and gives you that camaraderie,
exactly.
keeps you going. But things like that'll knock you down, man. That'll knock
Yeah,
you down. And it's just a tough thing. And that's why
yeah,
we always tip our hats off to, again, our soldiers here, because simply it's not easy.
yeah.
But one thing I do want to talk about and focus on before we get out of here is, what was your PCS or transition like? Uh, was it supported? Was it not supported? Did you get information about your benefits? Or did you have to scrape, fight, and push to get your information? Did you go through TAPS class? What was your experience like?
So yeah, we went through TAPS. Basically, every soldier who's transitioning out of the military go through TAPS. I believe it's I believe it's a month long.
Mm,
Or throughout your time frame where you're exiting out, you'll attend a couple classes here and there,
mhm,
and then right before you transition out, But with that being said, TAPS was I had a good experience with TAPS. They're basically there to provide knowledge and advice to you. They'll rank you in a system, I believe, 1 through 5.
mhm,
One being the lowest, 5 being, you provide society with good enough amount of resources to be successful. If you're ranked at a lower ranking, then they'll provide you with more classes, additional classes, workshops, building resumes, trying to get you prepared so that way once you're in the real world, because once that day comes, you're out. You're no more, the army does, or the military doesn't want nothing to do with you unless you do have the extra years of
the reserves that I have.
reserves. There you
Yeah,
go, the
yeah.
reserves. But for the most part, you're out here and you're by yourself. So there were some good experiences, and there's also experiences where it's like, yeah, I did attend all these classes and these workshops. My resume looks good, but I just don't know what I want to do in my life, right?
Mhm,
There's always that what if, and if you have, a family also as well, that's another pressure added on top of what do you want to do, right? Because now you got to figure it out faster because you have a support system.
yeah.
They basically depend on you. So that's what I found out, which basically was kind of a strain at that moment, And many other guys as well said the same thing. They were like, I don't even know what I want to do. I don't even know. And I've also heard stories where soldiers transitioned out and they're not doing anything, you know. As far as resources goes, they could give you websites on where to go. They'll link you in with the nearest VA hospital or VA clinic around your area. But ultimately, it's you still kind of feel lost. You still kind of feel lost. Where do I go? Who do I talk to? How do I get my benefits? Um, how do I, get all these claims that I was told before I transition out? Where do I go and get that at? And you could go to the nearest VA clinic and be like, hey, I was told that to come here. How do I get, my dentist? How do I get my teeth worked on? Or how do I go get a physical, et cetera, et cetera? And they're like, kind of lost. And you're just like, whoa, I have experienced this in the army lifestyle as far as I don't know. And now you're telling me that I don't know over here in the civilian world? And it's just like, okay, and nothing has changed. So I think it's very, very beneficial to find local companies such as Veterans for Vets, right? Who are out here working for you and out here trying to help you as much as possible to use all the benefits that you possibly can. Because at the end of the day, you signed your life away, you did your time, right? You deserve all those benefits, So it's a blessing to have companies like you guys who are out here supporting the veterans. You guys are all here for the veterans and
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's great.
No, most definitely. And that transition and that feeling of being lost, that feeling of being not supported, that feeling
Yes.
of having the stressors of family
Yeah.
relying on
Yeah.
you to make a way,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, yeah, it's one thing to have that in the civilian sector, civilian world, but you just didn't go through. We made a choice to go to the military,
Mhm.
but going through the military also made a choice for us. And when they made that choice for us, we never knew what that pathway was going to look like.
Yeah.
And that pathway could have been, you know, uh, going through a transitional state in Italy or fighting a direct combat fight in Kuwait. We
Mhm.
don't know what that looks like,
Yeah.
going on several different deployments. But however, I can tell you one thing: um, you took it, And when I tell you, you took it on the chin, and you look,
Mhm.
it is phenomenally put you in a position of success, and you've done everything I personally have seen to grow.
Yeah.
You know, um, we met years and years ago,
Yes, yes, yes.
and just to see who you have developed to be throughout the military,
Yeah.
throughout to be the husband you are, the father you are, and also the friend you are.
Yeah.
We thank you here at Veterans for Veterans again, and again, amazing, amazing, amazing story, and I foresee you to continue to put on impact.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, we thank you.
Yeah.
But before we get out of here,
Yeah.
3 things that you'll pass down that the military has given you down to your son.
So basically, teamwork, without a doubt. You need a team. Don't try to take everything on, to the chest and try to do everything yourself, right? You're gonna get burnt out like that. Teamwork, able to use certain individuals to help you out as well. So I would say teamwork is one aspect I would definitely pass down to my son. Um, being resilient as well. As I mentioned earlier, nothing is gonna be easy in life. Nothing is gonna be easy, but able to go through certain obstacles and just continue pushing. That is definitely a must. And the other thing I would say, the last trait that I would say is, I would say loyalty.
Mm,
You know, being loyal to your comrades is it's a must. Not a lot of people have a lot of loyalty in today's society, so I think loyalty is very important to have. Showing love to individuals, being supportive, and willing to do things um, for them. Shows a lot. Shows a lot of who you are as a person and your
mm.
character. So those are the 3 traits that I would definitely pass down to my son.
Those are big ones. Those are big
Yeah,
ones. So I hope you guys are listening out
yeah.
there. All right, Mr. Rivera, we really appreciate the time that you took out to be able to speak to our family here, veterans, and also friends. With that, we are going to provide you with the commemorative coin from Veterans and Veterans. And not only are we going to sit here and provide you a commemorative coin, we want to make sure that you understand that your military service is not going without honor. And we appreciate everything you have done for us and our family and our service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Veterans Voices, we're out.